So should this be something you should look at? 100%. You're absolutely crazy not to. I've said this line in a lot of my real estate posts all the time, was follow the smart money. Why doesn't Arlen do and all that stuff? Okay, how many of the real wealthy investors do that? That is what really moved the needle for me. And now to this day, I'm like hardcore heavy into it because it's actually even far more lucrative than. Someone asked me, what's the average stay in my properties? So I pull out my property management statements, but I found out my average stay was 12 years.
That is crazy.
That shocked me even. I didn't even realize that. But again, that's buying the right. And that's the other thing I say when we talked about delegating and all that stuff. If you're doing all that, you're not an investor. Quit calling yourself an investor. You're not. If you want to use, that's fine. Just understand you're donating to charity because they don't know how it works out in the end. So the key is to have the right. Someone said to me before, a mentor of mine, he goes, the richest investors before anyone else. Now, I didn't do the research. I could have seen that coming. That's when the real experience kicked in because a booming market can hide a lot of errors and mistakes and things you're not doing right.
Yes.
But when you go, that's where the real learning happens.
Today's guest is what happens when a no BS Alberta redneck figures out how to build an 8-figure real estate portfolio without ever laying tile, doing drywall, or pretending to enjoy property management. Arlen Dahlin became a real estate millionaire in his 30s, built a 25 million plus portfolio using joint ventures, and scaled up during market cycles that scared most people off the field. Now, he buys simple homes in strong areas, skips the shiny object strategies, and focuses on the stuff that builds real wealth, like equity, debt paydown, and strong relationships. He's also got a refreshingly blunt take on what actually matters in real estate and what doesn't. And now he's layering crypto on top of that real estate foundation using digital nitrous to accelerate his wealth. He's got the work ethic of a farm kid, conviction of a seasoned investor, and the gift for calling out the BS most people are too polite to mention. This is going to be part masterclass, part wake-up call. Please welcome to the show, Arlen Dahlin. Arlen, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got started in real estate?
Well, for me, what happened was there was years ago, I was fresh out of college, and it was probably only a month or two into my job. I was in college for business and marketing. I had a sales job, and I went to work one day, and there was a square white sheet on the door, and it said it was a sheriff's notice. I didn't know what a sheriff's notice was before that, which basically meant that was the end of my job. A little bit sad, but of course, I just had to drive back home, and then this is back in 1995, so I was searching the newspaper then at that time was the Edmonton Journal in the classifieds looking for my next job. And I came across just a little tiny article that said something about a weekend real estate seminar. And I just thumbed past it, didn't think nothing of it. And then for some reason, I just had this gut feeling. It kept drawing me back and drawing me back and drawing me back. And I went back to it and I looked at it and it said it was like $400 for the weekend, which I was about $400 short to pay for that. So as any creative guy would do, I called my mom to borrow the money. And luckily she was nice enough to do that for me. And the key word is borrow, because in my house, if you borrow, you pay back. There's no free rides when I grew up. Anyway, so I go to that seminar. And I'm not one of those guys that get all excited about that kind of stuff. I'm not one of those quick to drink Kool-Aid kind of guys. But I just went to check it out. And heard a lot of good information. I thought it seemed really cool. It seemed really enticing. It seemed to make logical sense to me. But I still have that part of me, that little logic part where I went, I don't know. Can I do this? Does it make sense? And I remember I walked up to a guy, must have been 60, 65. And he was like kind of frumpy, wrinkled clothes, shaggy hair, not well dressed, and just didn't present well. And I asked this fella, I said, like, so you're part of this group? And the guy's like, yeah. And I go, so do you own any property? And he says, yeah, I have about 16 properties.
Yeah.
And then right away I went, oh my God, if this guy can do that, there's no excuse I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have this overinflated thoughts of my abilities, but I'm going, if this guy can do it, I have zero excuses. And that was the catalyst that made me get going and get started and actually have some belief in myself. And then, so of course, when I started, at the time, it didn't seem very good. Like I didn't have money to buy my own properties. I'm pretty fresh out of college, which
Yeah.
was sucked at the time, but at the same time, if I look back, it was a blessing in disguise because I had no choice but to have to raise money to buy properties.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't fall back on my own money. I would have if I had it, but I didn't have it. So my first year, I bought 3 properties, and my first joint venture partner was my parents. I mean, I just went what I thought was path of least resistance, which don't get me wrong, there was resistance, but they finally gave me the money, and I don't know if it was because they believed in me or they just wanted to get me to shut the hell up. Real estate. It was one of the two. We're still not sure. But anyways, that was the start. And I mean, it took a little bit of work and some skills to raise money when you don't have a track record.
Yeah.
You don't technically have experience or anything. So that was a bit of a challenge, which of course later in years made raising money for me easier because I get to stack on experience, track record, and everything else. But I mean, I'm just saying that just to say it like it is for the people watching. I mean, all kinds of people have all kinds of excuses.
Yeah.
And if I could do it at a young age, I mean, that's already a mark against you too. You have more credibility with someone that's they got gray hair.
Yes.
So I'm young and no experience. I didn't even own my own home. And I was raising money to buy real estate. And I did it. So again, going back again. So my first year I bought 3 properties. My next year I bought 8. My third year I bought 15. My fourth year I bought 21. And then by 2002, so I guess that's 7 years later, I own 112 single family properties. And that's when I left my job and went full time and started buying multifamily and everything else. And I think by 2004, I was at about 300 doors. So, and this was all with a full-time job. A lot of the people, they go to seminars and stuff and people think they need to quit their job to do this. That's nonsense.
Yes.
In fact, I say you shouldn't. Why would you create that extra stress in your life, not knowing if your monthly bills are going to be paid to do this? There's no need for it. I did both. I mean, yes, I worked long hours. It took long hours and some commitment, some sacrifice to do it. But you don't need to leave your job. And even at that point, I left when I had 112 doors, and I was still scared to leave my job. Like, I'm just being honest. I wasn't comfortable.
Yeah.
But it just came that time where I knew that's what I needed to do. And it was scary for me. I remember at the time, what I did was, by that time, I did own my own home. I had about $60,000 or $75,000 equity in it. So I sold my home, which put 60 to 75, I can't remember, into my bank account. I bought the next home for myself at only 5% down. And the difference, I went, here's my runway.
Yes.
Here's my runway. And I better make good on it because I don't have a job anymore. And that's kind of how I started.
I love the fact that you highlighted your progression, because people would automatically look at your success and just assume you got a big kickstart. You got something that they don't have, and that's why they can't get started, right? You were super young when you got started. You didn't have capital. You didn't have any experience, but you didn't make excuses out of that. One other thing I liked is you went to a real estate seminar and you took action. You didn't think, okay, I need to just, become a professional learner before I can start taking action and getting out there, right? So I love that. Now, you mentioned, as we know, you in Edmonton, and we know here in Alberta and in Edmonton, it's exciting times. And you've been predicting this for years now, right? Now, for people out there who want to take advantage of the opportunity, do you believe that there's still opportunity when prices are rising fast? And what do you look for?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there's opportunity. We're like right now in Alberta, we're just at the beginning of an Alberta boom. So let's use an example. When I started, I remember the average price in Edmonton for a house, like 1,200 square feet, your average house was about 103,000. And then by the end of that boom, which was like 2007, 2008, it was around 365,000. So yes, you've seen prices in Edmonton, which they are starting to rise now, but if they rise 10, 20 grand, That's not like a 3x like we had like the last boom. So there's a lot of room to go. Would it have been better to start last year? Yes.
Yeah.
But it's you haven't missed this at all. This is still just the start.
Yes, exactly. And there's another thing that you mentioned there, because it's a common thing I find in the real estate investing circles is quit my job. I want to get a couple of properties so that I can quit my job. And people think that they can just live off of the cash flow. That's the goal, right? Replace my income with the cash flow and then I can quit my job. Now, what's your take on the obsession with cash flow? Where does the real wealth actually come from?
Well, to start, I guess, on average, like most properties, if you're only putting 20% down, don't cash flow. Yeah. Yes, the numbers may or may not say they do, but they don't. So what do I mean by that? Let's just say you bought a house and it shows $300 a month cash flow when you run your numbers, including maintenance and the repairs. Well, that doesn't take into account what if the furnace went? Well, that's $5,000. How many $300 a month does that eat up? That doesn't count. You had a bad tenant move.
Yeah.
Like you placed, or your property manager placed a bad tenant, and that will happen. It's not, it might, it will. So let's use that as an example. So you had a bad tenant, took you 2 months to get them out. So you lost $2,000 and $3,000 in rent, $4,000 in rent right there. Then you have to spend another $3,000 fixing, cleaning, painting with the damage and some of the crap they left behind. Then you got to re-rent it.
Yes.
And get it up and running again. So you could be out $6,000-$7,000 on just one of those. So saying you got $300 a month cash flow, you don't. Waiting to live off cash flow is like a slow boat to China. In fact, I've never lived off cash flow, and I still don't live off cash flow because, quite honestly, that's not where the money's made. The money's not made in cash flow. I know that's what you hear at seminars and stuff like that, but it's not. It's made in tenants paying down your debt over a long period of time, and it's made over time in equity appreciation. Yes. So when you're saying that, you want to be, you do what it is better to time the markets in terms of market cycles. Like again, I'll shine a light on it. I do it all the time. Like in 2008, we had an Alberta market crash. Yeah. Now I didn't do the research. I could have seen that coming. I trusted real estate groups and different stuff that I went to on what they said. They were not correct. That's not their fault. That's my fault. I didn't do the work. Yeah. So I wrote a good rundown that didn't need to happen, and I'm still fine, and I've done really well since then because you haven't lost a dollar until you sell, as long as you can still hold up. So, I mean, it was a hard lesson, but I mean, I'm fine and better. I mean, that's where I learned. That's where my real experience came in when the hard times came. That's when the real experience kicked in. Because a booming market can hide a lot of errors and mistakes and things you're not doing right. Yes. But when you go through a tough spot, that's where the real learning happens.
Now, given that you've been through those market cycles, what are some things that you consider going forward from those lessons that you initially learned? So now we headed into this boom. What are some things that you consider, or some things that people could consider as they start trying to either build a foundation or scale up? So they're not building up on a house of cards, that they at least setting themselves up for the best chance of success to actually see through market cycles.
Oh, there's quite a few things. I mean, we could go for 2 hours on that, but I mean, one of the things you want to do is you want to build, we call it a staying power fund every time you purchase a property. Yeah. I didn't do that at the beginning. Like, I mean, I didn't. Yeah. I should have. And then later on, I would have like an extra 1,000 or 2, but that's it. But I don't. Like, for example, El Ray, if you're joint venturing with me, I just tell people what they need to buy the property with me. I tell them the time, not how the clock. So I don't build a ledger that says this much purchase price, this much down payment, this much for closing, this much for this much for that. I just say, this is what we need. Yes. And in that, I'm usually taking a rough guide number to have as a staying power fund, which is like, use an example, it could be like about, say, 5% of the value of the property. Yes. And that goes to the account and it doesn't get touched. It's so that if there's some some surprising things that happen to the negative, whether, like I said, something, the roof blows off the house, or the furnace goes, you have a bad tenant, all that stuff, you're already budgeted for it and covered. So that's just a way to keep you safe. Because the idea is to buy and hold for a long period of time. And the idea is to never be a forced seller. Luckily for me,
Yes.
going through a down market, if you study markets, you should never have to go through a down market. But me going through a down market, that's what saved me when a lot of investors at that time, a lot of good people, good, strong people basically went bankrupt
Yeah.
because I had the funds set aside. And that's why, I mean, most people don't, I don't have like tons of partners, but my partners, when I joint venture them, like I don't ever promise monthly cash flow because I
Yes.
want that to stay in the account. So we're never, ever under any circumstances a forced seller. Now, I always have the option to pay it out. If it got to be a ridiculous amount of money in there, I could pay some out,
Yeah.
but it was never set as an expectation because you
Expectation.
always want you want to under promise and over deliver.
Yeah.
Set that bar so low you can trip over it.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And you know what? I definitely want to dig into that because you have a lot of insights that I know you can share with the audience. Now, for people listening out there, they're like, you know what, Arlen, I know that now is a fantastic time for me to really be building and scaling up. I'm all ears. I'm fired up. I'm ready to get going during the boom. I'm not scared to scale, but now the question comes into what do I actually buy? Because everyone's chasing deals, but you built a portfolio by skipping the shiny stuff and sticking to clean, simple plays. So let's talk about that. You've been laser focused on simple, clean properties, townhomes, single family, no suites. What's the thinking behind all of that?
So for me, again, it's like keeping it simple. Like knowing a little bit of many things doesn't make you an expert and doesn't make you overly strong. Using one or maybe at max two strategies and getting really good at it till you point you become an expert, that's where your success comes. Also, it really boils down to time, especially when you're in, like, we're at the beginning of a boom. So you have really got, your time is valuable. So the more you can do in the shortest amount of time equals much more success.
Yes.
So let's use an example. Like I didn't do flips. I didn't do burrs. What? There's nothing wrong with doing that. One, there's no need to do flips if you have a job.
Yes.
Like, again, so let's use an example of this market. So you buy a house, you spend 4 months, 5 months renovating, listing it and getting it sold, make 40 grand. Well, it in the next year, it'll probably go up 40 grand in value anyways.
Yeah.
So if you would have just kept it, it's like doing an extra flip and you didn't do the work. So it just doesn't make any sense to me to do that. There's an exception, like I said, unless someone doesn't have a job and that's part of their income to pay their bills, then I understand it. But I wasn't messing around doing rent to owns, agreements for sales, Airbnbs, none of that stuff. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Yes.
But what I did was I bought nice, clean, tidy properties and had a joint venture, closed on it, had a property manager, rented it out, and rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat as fast as I can without being reckless. So why do I buy, like, even at this point now in my career where I own so much real estate, I got people, they're not employees per se, but they basically just work just for me, like renovators and stuff. I can do a renovation in my sleep. I can do one without even showing up to the property. But I still, if I buy one tomorrow with a partner, I'm not buying one that needs a bunch of work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. So let's use an example. Again, that some of it's also, price is what you pay, value is what you receive. So back when I started, if I had the average price of a house was 103,000, would it really have made much difference if I paid 102 for it or I paid 109 when the values ended up at like 365? It's a rounding error. So I never got stuck on that. Don't get me wrong. I always did negotiate the best I could do on a deal. I wasn't just flippant about it because I'm responsible to my partners and my job is to do the best that I can. But, and the other reason why I didn't want to buy something and then spend a bunch of money to add value, because now I'm wrecking my leverage. So let's pretend I'm just going to use round numbers to keep it simple. If we had to put 20% down, and then I had to put another 20% in renovations to bring it, even though I increased the value a lot, at the end of the day, over the long term, my ROI will be half of what it was.
Yeah.
Because I've got twice as much invested. So my ROI will be half.
Yes.
That's just doing math. So no, I don't finish basements if it doesn't have a finished basement. I don't put suites in the place if it doesn't have a suite. I don't even own suited houses anymore, but we can talk about that separately. I just buy nice, clean, tidy properties in good areas where I can get equity building tenants, not be dealing with all kinds of crime or bad neighbors, and rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And you know what? While you're saying this, I'm thinking about people who do the BRRRR method. And sure, they refinance, they pull their capital out. But another thing is, and I know this is something that you've been really strict with if you've been able to scale this far, is being very meticulous about how you're spending your time, using it on the highest ROI activities.
Again, some of it's a blessing in disguise. It was forced on me because I had a full-time job.
Yeah.
So I like to brag that said I was so thoughtful when I started that I had this plan to keep it really simple and just stay focused. Well, it's not really that. It was, I didn't have a choice. I had a full-time job.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I necessarily made the best choice. I was forced into that choice. And then in reflection, because I compared myself to my peers, other people, investment groups, that I did far better. Clearly my path was the better way. Facts don't care about feelings.
Yeah.
Like we could use, I've done a BRRRR, like a lot of the stuff, like I've done a BRRRR, I've done a flip, I've done all that stuff like once, just for the experience. So I know what it takes. I'm not speaking from no experience, but let's use an example of a BRRRR. I mean, by the time you buy the place, that get your estimates, get somebody in, fix it up, do all this stuff, refi, get your money back out, count the shingles and all the stuff you got to do. In that time, I might have raised the money and bought 5 more properties while you did that one.
Yep.
Now imagine if you took all that time, because it takes a lot of time. I know, I've been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. You take all that time, and what if you would have spent that time instead raising money for your next deal? Not only that, at least for me, it's a lot more fun. I kind of have more fun meeting somebody at a lounge or a restaurant for lunch or dinner and this and that than standing at a renovation site managing contractors.
Yeah, no, 100%. And here's the thing, we're going to unpack that, because for people listening that are thinking, well, I don't know how to raise capital, this is one of the big reasons I have Arlen here. I want to unpack that. But Arlen, I still think you are a little bit humble, because there are people out there who still work and invest on the side, but still maybe aren't using the time in the best possible manner, that are still renovating on the sides and doing stuff. So definitely, I think that was a key factor for you, is how do I spend my time? Maybe if it wasn't intentional and you lucked out, I think you spent your time really, really wisely and as efficiently, because again, we all have 24 hours in a day. But now I want to ask you a question, is you use the strategy to buy clean properties that are just turnkey, and you put good tenants in there, they're in good locations. What property type have you found has sort of outperformed everything else long term? Because you mentioned you don't do basement suites. Now, I know the reason why, but listeners out there might not understand, because they may think, hey, I have a little bit more cash flow. It may perform better when I look at it. What property type have you found that just outperformed it all, and why do you move away from the basement suite?
Well, just before I answer that, I'm going to take one step back to where we were, and that is, so like on the time thing, I handed out property management within owning 2 doors. I handed off property management to property managers.
Yeah.
Now, that takes some work to find somebody good. Most of them suck. You pick the one that sucks the least. That's the reality. I didn't do my renovation and upgrades. I just had people. I didn't go to Rona. I didn't show up at Walmart. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. I had a bookkeeper lined up before I closed on my first property. Yeah. Even though I have a business background and could have done the bookkeeping myself, none of this has to do with laziness. It has to do with, I knew my highest and best use is 2 things. Find the next deal and raise the money for the following deal. Yeah. Everything else is a distant second, and I just kept it that way for everything. Now let's go back to what you're asking about the properties. So for me, when I started, honestly, I bought just about anything because I didn't know the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't, I still did my due diligence when I bought, but I bought like any type and every type because I didn't know the difference. I didn't have the experience. What owning properties for 30 years has told me, this is where we go back to facts, not feelings, is my financial statements tell me a story that's different than where you hear in many real estate books or seminars or anything. My financial statements told me the best performing properties of mine were Smaller single-family homes with double garages. The garage is a must part. I think this is Alberta anyways. And and townhouses in the right complexes. The right complexes, what I mean by that is not something with ridiculously high condo fees or poorly managed. So those two did far better for me. So, and that's where we come back to people buy properties based on performance, that's just insanity. Like a performer only tells you about 25% of the picture. There's another 75% that it's missing, which is what's your leverage on the deal? What kind of deferred maintenance is there on it? What area is it in? What part of the market cycle you're in? None of that is on a performa. And I use an example from many years ago. I remember because there's a fella that I met at a real estate event. He was a flipper and a successful flipper. Like he was actually a pro at it. And, but he did have a holding property at the time. And it was in a prime area at Edmonton, an older area, but a prime area. And it had 3 suites. And he showed me the performer on it, showed him at the time like $900 a month positive cash flow, which back then is massive.
Yeah.
And then he's questioning because he's looking at my most recent purchase, which was basically barely break even. And he's wondering, why the Sam hell would I buy that? And I remember I asked him, I said, who does your books? And it just so happened to be actually his mom did his books. So that was her background. So I said, grab your financials for the last 3 years. I'll grab mine. And let's compare. And when we compared, I did better than his, even though mine was barely break even and his was showing $900 a month. Mine was performing better. Why? Because the highest expense to a landlord is tenant turnover.
Yeah.
I'm not there. There's other things like non-payment of rent and damage and stuff like that. You add all that up, like in suited places, you get transient tenants. No, like there's not good, strong equity building tenants typically in a basement suite.
Yes.
They're your hairdressers, your Walmart greeters, and all this stuff. Is there exceptions to the rule? Of course there is. Is there exceptions where somebody has a basement tenant that's been there for 8 years and is just a lovely tenant? Of course there is. But my financials tell me something different. Again, I go back to my financials, not even my financials. I remember this was only about 2 years ago. Someone asked me, what's the average stay in my properties? And I actually had no clue. I had never pulled that metric up before. So I pull out my property management statements because all my statements, I got like 12 companies, I don't know, but every statement has the list of tenants and when they first moved in. So I pulled that up, but I found out my average stay was 12 years.
That is crazy.
Right. That shocked me even. I didn't even realize that. But again, that's buying the right properties. I used to own suite of houses. I sold them all about 15 years ago. Now, I'm not saying they're not good. Again, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I didn't like, my main motivation to do that was less about my financials because they didn't perform as well. Although the performer showed way better.
Yes.
They didn't perform quite as well. My main thing is I just got tired of hearing the stuff about downstairs fighting with upstairs.
Yeah.
You know, I still remember this one guy's upstairs, one person, people are downstairs, and the last one that I sold. Because I remember there was like upstairs getting pissed off because downstairs making noise. And downstairs getting pissed off because upstairs gets up so damn early for his job. So then downstairs tenant turns off the water heater because upstairs tenant, it's like babysitting. I mean, again, I had a property manager that had to deal with it all. But even he's actually good. He rarely will take on a suited house. He doesn't want them anymore neither because of all the work it takes. And again, there's exceptions to the rule. Not saying if somebody owns one, they should sell it. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just talking the bigger picture and what my preferences are and what my financial statements say.
No, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, especially if you're scaling up and you start having a lot of properties, then you kind of want the odds stacked in your favor and not having to deal with problem tenants because tenants aren't getting along. But I like the fact that you mention this often, is the performer only showing 25% on the picture. Because I mean, the performer just shows like a snapshot of like ideal situation. This is what it rents for. These are the expenses, but it doesn't show the performance over time, which is what the financials will show, you know? So that gives you a holistic view of it.
And I find that the financials tell you stuff that you didn't even believe.
Yeah.
that, like, for me, it surprised me on some of the stuff I'd uncover from looking over like a 3 or 5 year span.
Yes.
Took me off guard. Which ones did the best? Which ones didn't do quite as well? That took me off guard, where I thought I actually had it dialed in pretty good. But the
Yeah.
numbers are the numbers.
The numbers don't lie. Now, I wanna go back to something you mentioned. I mean, it's not just what you buy. It's what you build. It's how you build around it. Most investors will buy 2 properties, suddenly decide that they're property managers, bookkeepers, drywall experts, but you did the opposite. You started delegating early. So I want to dig into the mindset, because I think it's what separates the average investor from those who truly scale. What gave you that confidence to do that when your portfolio was still small? Now, I know you said you were working, you didn't have a lot of time, but often people would think, well, I also don't have a lot of money, so let's try and save on this and save on property management fees and all of those things. What mindset shift did you have to go that direction when most of the crowd's doing this way?
Well, again, some of my decisions was kind of forced on me, but some of it was thought through in terms of I did a thing in my head to help keep me motivated. In my mind, I said, every time I buy a property, it's 50,000 in my pocket.
Mm,
Well, I was projecting years ahead,
yeah.
equity appreciation, debt pay down, and sale, and then distribute. So, now, if I was doing it today, it would be a lot higher number. I'd be saying like 100, 200,000. At that time, it was 50,000. So, it was easy for me to go like, should I be sitting and grinding out some bookkeeping, or should I be on the phone or talking to somebody or meeting with somebody or being in a networking group where I could potentially meet some new partners or make some new connections, whether it could be renos or this or that, anything that moves it forward.
Yes.
I also know that I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So if I started doing bookkeeping right away, probably everybody would suck and they're not as good as me. So if I don't start doing it, there's never going to be an issue. And plus, I know my personality. There's things I like and things I don't like.
Yeah.
It didn't take me long to figure out I don't like property management. When I did it myself, I was actually pretty good at it because I have a
Yes.
sales and marketing background and I'm good at reading people and stuff. So it was actually pretty good. But I didn't want to be on call like a dairy farmer managing property.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to get the call Christmas Eve, my toilet's plugged.
Yeah.
You don't want to deal with it. It is so, and I found when I was managing, my motivation to buy the next one would that kind of dissipate a bit because I get excited about the art of the deal, putting one together.
Mhm.
Then I go, oh my God, now I got to take care of this thing for the next decade.
Yes.
Like I'm stacking all this extra work every time I buy something. And that was not overly motivating. So it just got delegated right away. And again, like we mentioned, part of it too is the fact that I had a full-time job. Some of it was forced on me.
No, I get that. I get that. And some people are out there and they worried about, and did you have this concern? Is like you hear the classic saying is, well, you either manage the tenants or you manage the manager, and property managers' jobs just to make money and all that good stuff. You still decided to go and outsource it, which I still think is a smart move. But what do you have to say for people who are like, I don't want to manage the manager and then still pay the manager anyway. I just manage the tenant and just take over it myself and handle it.
Well, because there's a cost to that. Every time you do that, there's a cost to that.
Yeah.
How many hours in a month, are you going to spend doing that? Now, I'm going to hear people are going to say, well, yeah, I got 3 and I didn't get one single tenant call this month. That's true. And that's more than that's common until that one month where you got a big problem and it sucks 3 weeks out of your life. Either someone not paying or a bad move or this or that. It's like that for property managers. A lot of people think property managers make all kinds of money. They don't. It's a low margin business.
Yeah.
They look at their portfolio and go, there hasn't been any blips for 4 years, so I'm paying this guy a bunch of money for nothing. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Because there's always spots where they're earning their money. They got to make it up for that.
Yes.
I know I was offered about 5 years ago to buy a property management business. I went over the numbers, a successful one. Basically, they're buying themselves a job.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? And it's not fun anyways. Plus, if you're going to do that, now you got to go through the whole learning curve of learning all the landlord and tenant laws. That's hours and hours. And then plus you have to actually gain experience to be good. All that time could have been spent raising money and buying a nice, clean, tidy property. They'll put 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand in your jeans. when I started, I never had this thing where within a certain amount of months, I want my properties paying me this much per month. In
Yes.
my mind, in my mind, when I started, they will pay me nothing for a decade. It's not an ATM. My living expenses is my job. This is investment. So I had a different mindset where everybody, they watch YouTube videos or go to seminars and they got this picture that they're going to be making thousands a month in no time. Not true.
Yeah.
And don't chase that. Don't chase money. Don't chase cash. You're an investor. And that's the other thing I say when we talked about delegating, property management, bookkeeping, and all that stuff. If you're doing all that, you're not an investor. Quit calling yourself an investor. You're not. You're an operator.
Yeah.
Let's use an example. Elon Musk. He's an investor. His staff are the operators.
Yes.
Who's more wealthy? The investors are always more wealthy. So you
Yes.
should strive in real estate to be an investor, not an operator.
I love the fact that you highlighted that. So, you're scaling the right way, you're keeping your time focused, and you're building a real business, not just becoming an operator. But the secret sauce behind all of this is capital. Now, you built your entire portfolio through joint ventures. And that's where a lot of people really hit the wall. So let's talk about raising money, structuring JVs and building the kind of trust that most people never figure out. What are some key points that someone needs to understand before asking for money?
Well, I'm going to say something that a lot of people aren't going to want to hear. And that is like learning the art of sales and influence is something that one takes study, but it takes practice.
Yes.
And I always use the analogy because years ago, before I went back to college, I used to teach martial arts. And then you can read 40 books on martial arts and how to fight, but not be able to fight your way out of a wet paper bag at the end.
Mm-hmm.
That's sales and influence. So you should read, you should study, but the key is practice. You have to be out there. And then you want to learn like some of them, like stuff that works.
Yes.
First of all, you have to start with a mindset. A lot of people kind of shy away from or are scared to or are nervous when it comes to raising money because they picture themselves as a plaid suited used car salesman out there trying to flog people for their money. That's not what you are. Yeah. Like back in my sales career, I never thought of myself like that. I thought of myself as an unpaid employee of every customer I had, meaning I'm going there to bring them value and advice and guidance on what is the best stuff they can buy from me and what makes sense to buy from others. So you're going out there not to quote unquote sell and close people necessarily. You're going out there to inform, educate, and see if what you're doing is a fit for them. Now, some people, because of fear, you do need to learn to close. And it's like, I at least to joke and say kind of like you got to push them off the cliff to get them to take action. There is a time for them, but only if it's a fit for them.
Yes.
So, I mean, someone could say, well, real estate's great. It's a fit for everybody. No, it's not. Like I could use an example. I remember one person that I didn't partner with because I could tell that this person was such a bundle of nerves. Like they would have gave me their money hesitantly and nervously, but they would have did it. But I know that the smallest negative article on TV or newspaper about real estate that was negative, they'd be losing sleep over it.
Yeah.
And I said to them, I go, you know what? If you're going to lose sleep over this, just put your money in a GIC and freaking have a smile on your face. It's not worth it. So no, not everybody's a fit. The other example for me is someone who's not a fit is like this is just kind of the more big picture, but if I'm talking to somebody and they're an accountant, a teacher or an engineer, I got red flags before I even start. Not because they're bad people, but those people like to fly shit out of pepper. Like they're so anal about everything, right? And is there exceptions to the rules? Yes, there are. But by nature, that's their personality, and I don't want to move forward with somebody like that. Yes. I don't want someone calling me, hey, I just wondered that house you got there is like, why did we put a new burner in? I know cousin Larry that could give us a used burner for the stove. It's like, oh my God, it's like freaking $12. Who cares? Like I couldn't work with somebody like that. I need to work with people that are busy. And it's just like, Arlen, you do your thing. You just take care of it. You're making all the decisions. That's what I need. So again, on the joint venturing side, you're not trying to con people into stuff. That's not the thing. You're out there to help people. And I had another person I turned down. I remember that too. Because I asked him a lot of questions. He was a business owner, and I asked him what he's making in his business, and his returns were ridiculous, like 40% margin in his business. And I asked him, I go, so could you reinvest more in your business and grow it even more? And he said, yeah, I could. And I go, dude, like maybe you should just stick with that because you got 100% control and not do it with me. Well, do you think you could beat that? I go, I think I can, but I can't guarantee I can.
Yeah.
And the delta may not be big enough to make sense. I go, you should stick with what you're doing. I'd love, believe me, you want to write me a 7-figure check. You don't have to twist my arm too hard.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense to me. So, and then we didn't, and he ended up actually referring someone to me, which worked out kind of nice, but like, you're still going to be ethical and do the right thing. I had another person who called me. This is going back a few years, and that person was 72. And I remember joking with him, hey, dude, by the time we sell, you'd be pushing dates. Like, you don't want to invest long-term real estate at 72. I could hook you up with somebody. You could private land. You could do something else to generate the money. But working with me, buying and holding long-term doesn't sound like a fit for you. So again, you're out there this sounds seminars, but being of service. You're guiding and informing and educating people. And then you check in to see if you would be a fit for them.
Like out of like all those stories that you just went through, there's a common denominator, and like you mentioned, it's actually wanting to help people. And I think most people don't realize that it's so transparent when that is your motivation versus like my motivation is just to get a partner for a deal. And you're coming out of desperation, trying to get someone to joint venture partner with, versus getting to know a person, understand their situation, and advise them for what's best for them. And if the next best step for them, then having the ability to take it further. But before we even go down that path, Arlen, I think I'd be doing everyone a disservice if I didn't ask you to highlight how you're able to build trust with someone to the point where someone's willing to, because I know you mentioned this, fund a deal without even seeing the property. I think oftentimes when I speak to investors, they just want to get a deal. And if they get the deal, they'll get the partner, because that's what they've been told time and time again. Find the deal, you'll get the partner. But you do things so completely differently to what's been told out there. I'd love for you to highlight a little bit of what that looks like.
So I've done some where I bought the deal before I had the partner, but most of them were like with my partnerships. My structures, I was like that day one. That's one thing I did right, was like I wasn't willing to partner with anybody that couldn't do at least 4 properties. Why? Because I had a goal to have 100 properties, and I knew I could manage 100 different bank accounts and 100 different partners.
Yeah.
So I had a minimum of like 4. My deal then when we started, we had to 1, set up a corporate account. 2, we have shareholders, like a USA shareholders agreement. 3, they had to fund the account in full. If we say they're buy 4, whatever it took to buy 4, that had to be in the account day 1. And I don't start looking for them till it's there.
Yes.
Because that's when you know you have the commitment. So was a saving grace for me, because I continually hear people pull out the last minute, which they need to blame themselves for that. It's not the other person's fault, because 1, they weren't sold right.
Yes.
You didn't get them to a level of conviction right. You got them halfway there, but you didn't get them all the way there, and you assumed you did.
Yes.
Which you don't want to do.
Another thing I know that you do is you clearly set expectations. And by doing that up front, it makes the whole partnership a whole lot easier going forward. So what are some things that you do? For example, you're not asking for the approval for the properties that you buy. They're not as involved. So can you list some of those things for us?
Well, first of all, unlike most people, I'm not going around selling a property or selling a performa.
Yeah.
Like my partners have never seen a performa before.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't know why people think they need to do that.
Yeah.
I'm selling two things, basically. Why real estate and why now and why here? That's one. And the second thing is I'm selling me.
Yes.
And and I have to have them to the point where they're buying both of those, you know, they're on the program on both those solid, or else we got nothing.
Yes.
So I'm not selling a property. I'm say like in Edmonton. You know, I'm not gonna, I can't do the conversation like I was sitting with a potential JV, but I'd be going like, why real estate? And I go, you know, this percent of you know, almost all wealthy people own real estate for the tax advantages, blah 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 blah. Then I go, then we're talking about what market are we in? We're in Edmonton, so what's good about that? Well, we got one of the highest immigrations, which is demand. And I go, with the highest, Alberta has the highest average income in all of Canada,
Yeah.
but our property prices are the lowest in all of Canada as a relation to that. So what makes logical sense? Where's the real estate prices going to go? Up.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying this in summary. I can say a lot more stuff. And no, I don't use a PowerPoint presentation. That's impersonal. How they feel like they're getting sold.
Yeah.
This is all a conversation, right? So I go through that whole why real estate, why now, why I do it. And my money's where my mouth is. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Right. So like for me, not everybody could say that. I could say my first partners were my own parents.
Yeah.
And it's not because I wanted their money. It's because I wanted to help them. And incidentally, they put in about a couple $100,000, which is all they had, which was refinancing their house. And I made them 7 figures. I'm thinking they're okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it worked out okay for them. Now, I use examples like that. If you don't have examples, you can use your own, or you could use somebody else's as long as it's true. Like, you don't want to bullshit people.
Yeah.
The other way, and then I got to sell myself. And I don't lie about stuff. Like when I started, I didn't try to present myself as a professional with so much experience and knowledge. I didn't, because I didn't have it. I remember when I first started to raise capital, I actually struggled really hard, even though I had a sales background. Why? Because I didn't believe in myself as the JV partner. How could I? With any logic, how could I when I don't have the experience? Yes, I have knowledge. I went to the seminars.
Yes.
I networked with people that knew what they're doing. I wasn't ground zero, but I wasn't kidding myself. I remember how I solved it, though. I said, because I knew I had to solve it, because I come from a sales background. You have to have a level of confidence to be successful. I remember I got to solve this because I suck until I actually have belief in myself. And I remember this is what I did. I went, okay, if anything ever went wrong, so my partners weren't going to be profitable, although our deal is 50-50, both on the win side and the lose side. So technically it's a nothing burger, but that doesn't sit with me. I said to myself, I will take a second and a third job to make sure they got paid back.
Yeah.
So I mentally got that in my head, and then now I could go out with conviction.
Yes.
I had to have belief that I would do good by them. If you don't have that, it comes through. Then when I talk to people, I tell them like it is. Like, I don't make everything all fairies and pixie dust. Nothing is all fairies and pixie dust. If you talk like that, you will for sure have resistance.
Yeah.
Everybody knows there's nothing that's perfect. So if you don't say negatives, like, you got to be careful how you say it and word it. But if you don't say negatives, you're not going to be trustworthy. For example, I'm just thinking of even my last partner I added. Now, this was probably even 12 months ago since I've added a partner. But I remember talking to her. Rarely do I get this question. It's actually kind of funny. But she goes, what do you think the annual ROI will be? And I have my staple answer. I go, how long's a piece of string? I go, if I quoted you an annual ROI, I would have to be pulling numbers out of my ass because I don't own a crystal ball. Then I refer them back to the information about the Alberta market, and I'm just letting them decide how they think it's going to prove out.
Yeah.
Not to a percentage basis, but just that it'll be good. Right? And then I said to her, here's the thing in real estate. I go, you own with me. We're buying and holding long term, and we're going to do extremely well. We're doing this so we can both get dirty, rotten, filthy, stinking rich. That's what we're doing. And this RSP nonsense. So I have some fun with it, right? And then I'll say to them, And I did say this to her. I said, here's the thing. I'm going to be honest with you. You asking me about annual ROI. We could go, 1, 2, 3, 4 years. First year, or ROI is 1%. Next year, it's -3 because we had a couple of repairs and maintenance. Next year, it's +5. Next year, it's 0. We could go for 4 years like that. And you're going, why the hell are we even doing this? And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, year 5, everything just skyrockets. And now you just look like a rocket scientist. And I go, it could happen in the first 12 months. It could be 36 months. Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but we're doing this for the long term. And then I'll actually, because I can tell that story, would go back to when I started. It took me till year 7 till it looked like it made any sense of what I did. Then at year 7, then each year my network's going up like 7 figures. But it's all from work from prior.
Yes.
So this, if you need an exact annual percentage income or return, private lend to me then. We'll give you a fixed rate. Again,
Yeah.
so I can't guarantee that. And then, like, usually when I'm talking to them about tenants, like about staying power fund and stuff, like I said, I will tell, and things will go wrong. I'm not saying it may. I go, it will. That's why not everybody does this.
Yes.
Our job, you have me to have when things do go wrong, to manage it, take care of it, and you have no brain damage. And we come out smelling like roses in the end anyways. I go, that's why you have me. So I take care of that stuff. But hopefully nothing goes wrong in the first 12 months. Maybe nothing goes wrong for 5 years.
Yes.
But at some point, something will. It's not a maybe, it's a for sure. Or everybody would do this.
Oh, 100%. There's a ton of like verbiage that you use there that I think people can just take with and keep in their toolbox. And, I'm just thinking of the progression of our conversation so far. We started very high level on the economics, where we are in the market. And then we narrowed down into like property types. And we've sort of progressed into, delegation and now raising capital and having these conversations. But so people kind of know what that conversation looks like, how to set expectations, and they're probably thinking to themselves, or they could be thinking to themselves, some people at least, well, how do I go and find these partners? Maybe I don't know enough people. Well, obviously, we all know the key is to go and network, right? But how does someone actually network with purpose instead of just showing up for drinks and know that they actually spending their time wisely?
So there's many ways. Like, obviously, when I was new and got out of school, I didn't have a network of wealthy people because I'm just a young college grad.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't have a network of that. So, I mean, of course, I tapped my parents for a couple right day one.
Yeah.
That ended quick. And then, after that, and I don't have a single partner that I locked down from a real estate group event. And honestly, that was by design. That was intentional. You go, Arlen, why that? Well, I was always worried that there's like all these people, they go to the real estate things and they hear all this great stuff about real estate because everything's just positive and high five and fairies and pixie dust. That their level of expectation as me as a partner would be higher than what's reality, because in those groups, they don't talk about the negatives necessarily.
Yes.
So I didn't want that. So I didn't want somebody that thought they knew real estate, but they really did do nothing, and then have them ride me like a wretched mule throughout the next 10 years. So I prefer to source people and plus in that room, you are not in a white space. You're competing with 10 other people that are humping the legs of everybody for money. I didn't want to be that. I want to be in a white space where they got nobody to talk to about real estate.
Yes.
So for me, it was actually quite simple. My way was, I mean, I didn't do it with everybody, but if I felt like someone of significance or someone that might make sense, like you'd be a conversation with them, like, hey, how was your weekend? And I would say something like, oh, as long as it's true, like I didn't make up stuff, but I go, oh, I worked all weekend. I had to go and I actually wrote an offer on a property, or I was looking at a property, or I had to check out a property. And they're like, what do you mean? Oh, I just buy rental properties. I usually do it with partners, and we just buy them and hold them because one day I want to be dirty, rotten, filthy, stick, and rich.
Yeah.
I don't do RSPs. And I'll say that with a smile on my face, right? And then 9 times out of 10, they'll start asking more questions.
Mm.
What do you mean? What are you talking about? What do you do? And if they don't ask any questions, I stop there. I'm not going to be like some Amway, hey, you got to meet with me for coffee. We got this great opportunity. As soon as someone says that to me, I'm like this. It's like, oh my, well, I'm going to dump on something.
Yeah.
So they're asking the questions. As long as they're asking the questions, I'm answering the questions.
Yes.
And then sometimes that could lead to something like, hey, we should go for drinks, or you should explain that to me. Like, yeah, we can do that sometime, whatever. Sometimes they don't say that, and I just let it sit. Because, maybe it'll spin up in their mind. I've had it many times where they contacted me later. Hey, remember when we talked about this? Oh, yeah. Like, I'm not needy. That's the other thing when you're raising money. Like, there's another bust every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, your job isn't to meet somebody and just do everything in your power to slam close them to give you money. There's a bust every 10 minutes. Relax.
Yes.
Sit down with people, have a conversation, help them out, educate them a little bit, see where they're at. Maybe it makes sense, maybe no, like whatever. I also pre-qualify. I'm pretty good at that. I'm trying to make sure if they're worth my time. Like if all they got is, two $10 bills in their wallet and 2 bottles they could bring in the back of their truck to get 10 cents for, we're not a fit.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just, the thing is, you have to keep sales resistance down. You can't sound like a salesperson. And again, if you're leading with value, right? You're leading with information that can help people. That's what you do. Now, I've had one question I get a lot of people that have said to me, well, maybe I should do this myself. And my answer is always absolutely. And I actually mean it.
Yeah.
And then I go through a process of, we got door number 1 or door number 2. You can do this all yourself. And I go through the litany of stuff with that. Let's say you're going to do it yourself. So you'll be like me, like when I started. You'll spend, 4 or 5 figures trying to get an education, getting up to speed on what to do. You'll step on lots of landmines. You'll have days where you high five. There's days where you want to kick walls. There's days where you want to dangle from your cord in your bathroom, and then you're gonna work all kinds of log hours because you got to maintain your job. Then you're going to stack this on top. But at the end of the day, here's honestly was my answer a lot of times, because I'm talking with people, usually people that own businesses. But at the end of the day, if you really wanted to, I know you could do it.
Yeah.
Because you've already proved you can, because you're successful in your business. So I have no doubt that you could do this and do a good job.
Yeah.
But then there's door number 2, where it's like you joint venture with me or somebody like me. The keywords is or somebody like me, so it's not salesy, where you give them the money, they do all the work, and they already have the expertise, and you don't have any brain damage. It's not taking any time out of your day, but you're giving up 50% of the deal for that.
Yes.
So I don't know which one is best for you. Only you can tell me which one makes the most sense for you. I don't know that answer, because that's all logic and it's all truth, right?
Yeah.
And that's all I do.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And like you say, it is all truth. It's for them to decide, am I going to get just a better return on my time just doing what I do and putting this with someone that I trust? And you're not trying to hide options or sugarcoat anything. You've been open, you've been helpful, and that builds trust. Now the one thing you mentioned is, influence, and you've clearly mastered influence over time, and you've given people a lot of pointers and tips to think about. But the biggest thing you highlighted is, you mentioned this with regards to martial arts, and one thing that actually came to mind was, I think it's a Bruce Lee quote, is like, don't fear the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks, but fear the man who's practiced, or 10,000 different kicks, but fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. I could be butchering it, but that's the gist of it, right?
That's right. I know that one. That's right.
Yeah. And just looking back at your entire journey, like, it's something that you've maybe intentionally or even unintentionally embodied. You've delegated as much as you can, and you found out that, influence and building relationships is the strongest skill to have. So let's focus all my time and effort on that, right? So you put the reps out there, and you've had these conversations. You've highlighted how people should go about it. But for those people who don't want to mindlessly just have these conversations, but they want to ensure that each conversation they sort of stacking skill on top of skill and practicing purposefully, for someone who's been doing this for a long time, where should they start? Because there is an education component, but that's just one component. They have to be putting that to practice. But where can they go to learn a little bit more about how they can master the skill?
Well, I'll go back to number one is just start today.
Yes. Yes.
What I mean, start, I don't mean start reading a book. I mean, start.
Yes.
Because that's where it all happens. If you're not doing it, reading 20 books is not going to help.
Not going to help. Yeah.
You have to be out there applying what you're learning. Again, I mentioned like there's most of the books actually are not good, but there's a couple books on the sales side, sales and influence side that are good. And I probably recommend There's Exactly What to Say. It's a strong one. The other one is The New Model of Selling. That's a strong one. Is this going to save the day for anybody? No, it's not. No, but it gives you just a bit of a foundation. Again, I always say when I started, I say it like it is. I was blessed with two things. One, I had a bit of a sales background. And by the way, in my corporate sales, all the training I got was wrong. That's pretty much exactly what you don't do. But what I did have is practice. And I kind of learned to do it my own way. And the other thing I had is I was lucky and blessed to have a strong family and a tight-knit family. Yes. So I always had this thing in the back of my head, doesn't matter how bad Arlen could potentially fail or not do good, I got a loving family.
Yes.
Now, different, but I mean, that I had the drawbacks of I was young. I didn't have a dollar to my name hardly. So I had all these other drawbacks too. So everybody's got their plus and minuses when you start. So you can make excuses or you can just do it. So on the sales side, influence side, it's another good one to read is Never Split the Difference. That's a little bit of the negotiating side, but it's also, there's a lot of psychology in that too. That's got a lot of value to it. Then you got to, but none of it sticks unless you're applying it. In other words, like I said that one book, Exactly What to Say. It's great. You can read it a bunch of times, but if you're not out there starting to use it, you forget it within 2 months anyways.
Yeah.
You didn't get any farther ahead. You have to get out there and do it. And to get out and do it, again, I'll go back to, I know most people are afraid of sales because they feel like they don't want to be that. Everybody's had that slick talker talking to them and they don't like them. So you have to start by changing the mindset. That's not what you're doing. You're going out there to help people. But no, but it's not just, I'm not fairies and pixie dust. You're not just going out there to help people. You're going out to help yourself too.
Yes.
Like I tell that even when I'm talking to joint venture partners. So I'll just say, it's like, what? And it's like, yeah, I'm totally here to help you make you a bunch of money, but don't kill yourself. I'm here to make money too. I said, I'm nice, but I'm not that nice. Like,
yeah.
I'm here to line Hip Pocket National Trust for myself too. And they laugh. But I mean, I'm telling them something that they already know.
Yeah, exactly.
The difference is I actually say it.
Yeah.
So that's what builds trust because I actually will say it.
Yeah. 100%.
But then it comes, you learn this in sales and influence. It comes because it's not just what you say, it's tonality.
Yes.
It's all the, it's the body language. Yes. Like some stuff I'll say with a smile or grin or a laugh. And sometimes I'll say more, just look with a straight gaze, like a seriousness thing. Like all those things come into play.
Yes. So
sending out property information or sending people emails to raise money is goofiness. I don't care what anybody says.
If you're interested, send me your email. I'll send you a performer.
Here's a perfect analogy for people to let's just get this sunk in.
Yeah.
Especially this newer generations. Here I am dating myself. Yeah, I'm getting some gray. I still think I'm 20 though. But anyways, like even my kids, like all they want to do is text, right? They don't even email, they just text. Generation before them, like in between me and them is all emails.
Yes.
So a lot of people try to raise money. They're doing it by email, sending pictures, emailing stuff. Oh my God, that shit doesn't work.
No.
Yes, a blind squirrel can get a nut every now and then. So don't tell me I got one that way. Good for you. A blind squirrel will get a nut every now and then, but it's not the way to go. So let's just use the analogy. Elray, did you propose and build a relationship with your wife by email?
Imagine that.
And you didn't, but let's just say, do you think you could have?
Oh man, no. I'm not that good
No,
looking.
right. That's the thing with this. It's a crazy thing. Sit in front of somebody.
Yeah.
Spend a bit of time.
Yeah.
Pre-qualify them. You can't spend your time running around meeting a bunch of yahoos that would never be a partner. Like, you learn to
Yes.
pre-qualify a little bit too. But people buy from people, and people value that connection.
Yes.
And people value truth. And that's where I say I will always say some negative stuff. I'm careful how I say it, but I will always say it because it's not a negative.
Yeah.
It actually makes so everything you say, they take it for what you said, because they know you'll say both sides of a coin. You'll call it like it is.
Yes. You know, the key thing is building these relationships. And you say qualify people. I think it's a skill that you build over time as well, because you'll have a couple of conversations. You're like, maybe I should have actually found that out ahead of time. So now next time that's in the tank now. Okay, now I can qualify for that, and you sort of build onto that. So qualifying people, not hiding things from people either. I mean, as you mentioned, you carefully crafting the way you deliver it, but you're not hiding anything. You're being open about it, and people appreciate you being candid, right? And it builds more trust and genuinely wanting to help other people.
I'm going to bring up something too. You have no idea this, because you would have told me not to, but I'm going to do it anyways. And that is, one of the things we talked about early on was like leveraging your time, right? Property management, all that stuff. Well, what I didn't really cover, and it's actually is really important to me, I do this all the time, is you also got to learn to use realtors and use the right ones. Now, I'm saying this because it's going to plug Elroy a bit. I know that. That's why I didn't bring it up to him. He didn't know I was going to say this, because he would have told me not to. But he knows I'm not a good listener. I do whatever the hell I want. So like early on, I used realtors for almost every purchase. Why? It makes no sense to go around freaking putting out posters and flyering houses. That's ridiculous waste of time.
Yeah.
I mean, can you get the odd deal? Yeah, you will. I'm not saying you won't. But if you use good realtors, they're free labor. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
You got to use realtors. And then you were negotiate your best deals, but I mean, you want to get the best deal you can, but if you get a good fair deal, and here's what I see from a lot of people is they don't know the difference, that it makes a massive difference on what realtor you use.
Oh yeah.
Now, the best realtors, I'll tell you firsthand, aren't necessarily the most popular or the ones with the most awards. They're not necessarily the best ones. In fact, a lot of times they're not. Sometimes they are. Most times they're not. But you got the right one. It's a day and night difference. Like I always tell people, I get people go, well, I'm using Uncle Larry or Aunt Bessie or something like that. It's like, and my answer to them all the time is the same thing. If you want to use family or friends, that's fine. But just understand you're donating to charity. Yeah. So are you willing to donate? Basically, you're donating $5,000 to $10,000 to $15,000 to use someone unskilled. They just don't know it, and they will never know it.
Yes.
Because they don't know how it works out in the end. So the key is to have the right realtor. Now, I'm going to speak firsthand because I come from a background of sales, then sales management, and then branch management in publicly traded companies, like not working for grandma's cookie bin, so I was a professional. And part of my point when I was like, say, branch manager, I'd hire people. And I've met over 100 realtors, and I could tell you, out of all the 100 that I've met, I could probably count out 6, maybe 7 would be a stretch that I would have ever hired.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Now, I've met 100 nice people. I've met 100 polite people that are realtors. And I read 100 that could fill out an offer form and do all that stuff. I've met lots of those. But the ones that have the real skills, that's not trained when they do their real estate training. The number one skill is interpersonal skills, sales skills. And the other part is they have a network.
Yes.
They need to know how to build relationships. You're going, what does that matter? Oh, it matters, right? It's no different than like Elray got one of his clients a deal that actually came from me.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have got it if he didn't know me.
Yeah.
But he did this, and this is a rock star property. that I didn't really want to sell, but I had to buy more crypto. But anyways, but it was, but he had the relationship with them, and
Yeah.
he got a deal that nobody else would have got. Now, is that normal deal? No, it's not. But if you have the right realtor, now here's some qualifications. One, they know what they need to know how to sell, and they need to know how to influence. They need to have relationships in the industry.
Yes.
So I'm going to give another example. This isn't of El Rey, so El Rey doesn't think I'm pumping his tires too hard. It's a different realtor. I helped a young feller get his first house. This was going back about 9 months. What happened is it went multiple 9 offers.
Mhm.
He got it and didn't even end up going over list. Why? Because the realtor I plugged him into, he's another one that I've known for 25 years that I plugged him into, had relationships for a lot of years in the industry, and they liked him, because you could have relationships and they'll hate you,
Yeah.
but they like him. And because of that soft spot, they made sure that deal stood out about the 9, and he got it done.
Yes.
Now, Aunt Bessie couldn't have pulled that off. She would have just got thrown in the round file. And then, why else is it important to have a good realtor? Because if they're good in our network, like use an example like El Rey, it is, they can tap into the experience of, say he's got a relationship with me, of my experience.
Yeah.
So a lot of times he can guide people saying, hey, it could be Arlen, it could be somebody else. You're saying, I know these guys, and here's what they do and why.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to tell you to do that, but he's able to reflect 30 years of experience from multiple different people to help you make the right decision. And I'll be honest, some of the answers he gives you could be stuff you didn't want to hear.
Mhm.
But he'll tell you the straight truth, and you can just do with it what you want. But there's a ton of value in that. Now, I'm going to use an example of El Rey. Well, actually, I first met him about 2-3 years ago. I remember
Yeah.
now, he reminded me. He come up to me at a networking event, and he says to me, will you go on a podcast? And I just looked at him and said, no.
No.
Because I didn't know him. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I couldn't be bothered. And I don't think I talked to him for a year after that or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But somehow we ended up talking. And then through our conversation, we're talking about it's relationships and everything. He figured out that I'm trying to set up like a Zoom thing at my home office, but I have no clue and I
Yeah.
have no time. And he says, I know how to do that. Here, I'll just set that up for you. And I'm thinking, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
So, and he did, but I never forgot that. Like, he wasn't asking for anything, but this is reciprocity. It's like if you are in
Yes.
sales and influence, like for me, this is my personality. I go, he didn't expect anything, and I know that 100%, but that didn't sit right for me. I had to find a way to
Yeah.
return some solids back to him. And in that process, I got to know him more. Then in that process, we got a relationship. Then in that process, we're both doing more business, doing better because of some of the things we've done together. Now,
Yeah.
that's an example with El Rey. Now, you start multiplying that with second, third, fourth, and fifth person. That's where the nitrous kicks in.
Stacks up. Yeah.
That's where it kicked in for me, say, on Bitcoin crypto, all by accident. It's my network and people doing me favors and me doing them stuff.
That's
Now,
it.
I'm dragging it out a little bit here on you, poor El Rey. He's got to put up with
No,
all
I'm
my
loving
yapping.
it. Keep it going.
So, like, on the relationship side, because I have to point this out because I see it all the time. Networking is not
Yeah.
about hanging out with a bunch of people that are the same level as you in what you do. That's called socializing, not networking. So, like, I see on Facebook, these guys, oh, look there's a picture of these guys. They got the selfies. They got 8 of them at the table all having drinks together, where they're all 8 at the same level.
Yes.
That is not networking.
No.
That's socializing. Now, there's nothing wrong with socializing. I love socializing. I actually really enjoy it.
Yeah.
But don't confuse that with work. That's not targeted
Yes.
networking. Targeted networking is you being able to find ways to get in front of people that are substantially ahead of you. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the real estate or crypto sphere.
Yes.
In this case with El Rey, I stepped it up with a guy that understood tech better than me and got me set up.
Yeah.
But when true networking, if you want to grow and be successful, is finding people that have knowledge or connections that you don't have. Not hanging out with a bunch of buddies that you've went to seven seminars with, and you all go out for drinks and high five. That's not work. That's fun. Nothing wrong with fun. That is key.
Absolutely. And the story is so funny because it was someone that pointed, Arlen's at the back of the room and he's like usual, he's got a big crowd around him. And another investor that I knew is like, hey man, should have that guy on your podcast. He points to Arlen. Arlen's got this cool vacation looking shirt on. And yeah, it was an interesting interaction to say the least. But no, it's an important factor. I'm glad that you highlighted that because, building those relationships and giving value, it stacks up. And knowing people who have relationships and a big network allows you to have a lot more leverage over everything else. So key people, key relationships, leading with value. And you're right, not all realtors are built equally. That's for sure. Honestly, up to this point, I'd be doing the audience a massive disservice if I didn't bring up the one thing that still surprises people about you. I get asked this question really often. So you've built an 8-figure portfolio by staying focused. No shiny objects, no TikTok trends, just buy, hold, and repeat. But behind the scenes, you've been Batman. You've been Bruce Wayne, real estate by day, Bitcoin Batman by night. So honestly, Arlen, I've got to ask, what pulled you into the crypto space? Because I think that took a lot of people by surprise because you've been real estate for many years. And how does a guy who avoids every shiny object end up becoming a full blockchain vigilante?
Well, I like to say because I'm very proactive and I study and I read lots, which I do all that stuff, but that's not why. Like for me, I came into it by accident. So I was about 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago. Again, we talked about relationships, and I've always been big on that. And I was really tight with a guy. In fact, he's a joint venture partner of mine. He's an 8-figure guy. And he introduced me to, asked me if I wanted to go for lunch with a fella that's worth over $500 million.
Mm.
And I asked him, I go, so is he into real estate? And he's like, no. I don't care. Any chance you could sit with somebody like that, you're bound to learn something. So I agreed. So I went for lunch. I stayed pretty quiet at that lunch meeting because I just wanted to see what all, golden nuggets I could try to soak in from being at that lunch meeting. And it was at the end, and we were just basically standing up. I just paid for the lunch, and we're already standing, and this guy hands me a book, and he says, Sonny, which is always funny. I still laugh at that because the dude's probably only 5 years older than me, if that, and he calls me Sonny. Anyway, Sonny, you should read this book. And he hands me the book called The Bitcoin Standard. And honestly, I was actually quite nervous around him. I don't know why. It was a weird thing. So I didn't even look at the book. Like, I didn't even look at the title. I just said, thank you. And I really appreciate it. And as we all walked out the door, then I got to my truck and I set it on the passenger seat. Now look at this book. And I'm like, oh, for Christ's sake, I don't got time to read stuff like this. And then, because again, I'm relationship based. And I thought, I got no choice. I have to read this damn book and I don't want to. Why do I have to read it? Because if I get to sit in front of this guy again, and he so happens to ask if I read it, I felt I would be very disrespectful if I said no. Because somebody, I know from helping lots of new people, if you give them pointers and stuff and they don't act on it, you have no motivation to help them anymore. Not because you're mad. It's just because you know it's a waste of your time. So I'm like, oh God, I got to read this flipping book. And I was actually pissed. I was sour because years ago when I started real estate, I promised myself, I'm just staying on my rails. I'm not going off. I'm going to be an expert. I'm not going to chase shiny objects. Anyways, so I read the book, which was actually, I'll be honest, it wasn't an enjoyable book to read. It was actually kind of painful. It was a tough read, a long read, but I was intrigued. And it's like, oh my God, a bunch of this stuff is making sense to me. And this book now is like 14 years old. And then I started digging more and digging more and digging more and understanding more. And pretty soon I'm just like, I'm in a vortex. I'm going right down this freaking rabbit hole, studying. And probably one of the reasons why I was drawn to it so close is because there's so much correlation to real estate. There's a lot of overlap to the same thing. And then as I got into it, so then once I kind of got into it and knew 100%, I got to do this. This makes sense. Next thing I did is I don't want to do the hard way like I did in real estate where I learn everything the hard way. So I looked for someone to show me and teach me.
Yeah.
Especially me, because I'm not a tech guy. I'm a people person. I'm out and about, and me and computers don't get along. If I got a problem, I call somebody, they make it go away. Like I got the attention span of a flash cube to freaking take care of that stuff. Yeah. So anyway, I'm checking Kijiji, I'm checking Facebook, I'm Google searching for somebody. I'm going to write a check, and this guy's going to freaking just show me. Couldn't find anybody. Nobody. I understand why now, because it's so lucrative that nobody could bother, is really what
Yeah.
it comes down to. So then I had to redneck it because I do have tenacity, just like I did when I started real estate. And then I went, okay. And I just knew I'm going to take beat downs because that's how it started in real estate too. Like nothing is easy. So I did. And I started off with significant money because I knew if I didn't, I wouldn't pay attention. But I could actually remember what I started with. I started with 1.67 million invested. And within 6 months, that was worth 435 grand. So I didn't come flying out of the gates in a good way.
Yeah.
But luckily by then, I actually had my conviction, kind of like going through the Alberta real estate crash. I had my conviction. Now I just had to dial it in harder. Now I understand it way better. Like real estate, I needed to start building key relationships in that industry, which I did. Now I'm friends with the guy, like the founder of a publicly traded crypto company and a VP of another company and a number of other people I built relationships with. That is what really moved the needle for me. And now to this day, I'm like hardcore heavy into it because it's actually even far more lucrative than real estate. And I don't have tenants and toilets.
Yes. Yes.
I don't even want to admit it, getting older. What do you want to back off? There's more flexibility with time. There's no emergencies. So anyways, It's been an unexpected journey.
You're not a super young guy, right? So there's a ton of people that may be at your age that may decide, no, that's what I'll stay in my lane. What I know, that's for the young guys, you know? So you really must have seen a ton of value in this completely revolutionary way of investing to really take the time to actually get into this, you know? And so at the time you struggled to find people to show you how to get this done. But if someone's new to crypto and they're like, Arlen, I believe you. I'm starting to see this pop up all over. You know, initially I thought maybe this was some sort of a scam, but it seems like there's some validity to this. Like this is being adopted on a higher level. Where do I begin?
Well, like for me, when I started, it was like, actually, the funny thing is I actually tried to, when I started my study, I actually tried to disprove it. I wasn't trying to approve it because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to learn something else.
Yeah.
God, it was enough to learn all my lessons in real estate. I didn't want to do anything else. So I was trying to disprove it, and it went the other way around. For someone starting, well, I go, first of all, it's not risky like a lot of people think. Like they get two big things that people know a little bit about it. They go, it's risky and it's too volatile.
Yeah.
But what they don't understand, the volatility is the benefit.
Yes.
Here's a fact. Anybody we'll use Bitcoin as an example. Anybody there's not not one person that has lost money owning Bitcoin if they've held it for 4 years. They made significant money. Not one person ever.
Yeah.
So validity, forget about it. Then there is a learning curve to it, but it's not hard. It's actually quite easy when someone shows you. I'll relate it to, say, brakes on a car. Like, you know, most people won't change their own brakes because they don't know how.
Yes.
It could be they don't have time, but let's just say they have the time. It's because they don't know how. But if someone showed them, you're going, oh my God, that's so overly simple and easy. It's ridiculous. But it's not easy till someone shows you. Until someone shows you, it's like almost impossible. So, like for me, I had to learn most of it the hard way. The last 50%, I was able to make some relationships so I could learn that the easy way by someone just sit in front of me, click, 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 show me exactly what to do. Then it was easy. So but I was motivated to figure this out, build a relationship so I could do that because I didn't want to do everything the hard way. One, because for me, it's not fun on the crypto side. I'm just being honest because I like to be out of the house kind of a person, not sit in front of a screen. That's not me.
Yes.
So the pain of learning was actually in some ways harder than real estate because I'm a social person and I like to be out. So anyways, I built the relationships, fast-tracked it. And because of all my, it's just kind of happened by accident. Because of all my relationships, I ended up doing a couple courses on this. And all I did was for other people, it's mostly real estate investors. All I did was reverse engineer what I wanted.
Yeah.
And like the last thing I wanted was someone standing in front of a room speaking on this stuff. It's like, oh no, click by click. How do I do this? Like you're showing me hands on, let's go. And that's kind of what I did for some people.
Yeah.
If I was to revert back to, so should this be something, a piece of interest should be something you should look at? 100%. You're absolutely crazy not to. Like let's use an example. I've said this line in a lot of my real estate posts all the time. It was follow the smart money. So let's tie this to real estate. Why doesn't Arlen do BRRRRs and rent owns and all that stuff? Okay, how many of the real wealthy investors do that? Zero. Again, not saying they're not good strategies, but let's follow the strategies. They buy nice, clean properties, rent them out, hold it for a long time. Now, let's use the example, say on the crypto side. So who is investing in it substantially? You go, Robert Kiyosaki. He hasn't bought real estate in 3 years. It's all going into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Grant Cardone, he just flipped 4 months ago. It's funny because he's on, now I've seen a couple of YouTube videos. He said he's been doing it for 7 years. No, he hasn't.
No.
His brother, Gary, who's just as wealthy as him, has been trying to talk him into it for 7 years.
Yeah.
And he finally did. So, but Grant's all in now. He even says that all his money generated from his revenue properties goes into Bitcoin now. Anyways, Elon Musk, Kevin O'Leary, Stan Druckenmiller, Paul Tudor Jones, Richard Branson, Tony Robbins, Mark Cuban, Ray Dalio, Donald Trump, Michael Dell, Brian Rose, Jordan Peterson, Patrick Bet-David, BlackRock, Samsung. My thinking is, might not be a bad idea to do what they do, except for if you think you're smarter than them, then probably not. Just don't bother.
It is so true. Now for people listening out there, like, well, Arlen, yeah, you make a ton of sense. You know, those are all people that have done things to somewhat of the highest levels, and they have conviction in Bitcoin and crypto. So I get that. But how do you see real estate and crypto working together as like your long-term wealth strategy? Because you're obviously not against real estate. You tie in the two, right?
No, not at all. I mean, for me, I'm getting the best of both worlds, because I'm going to say it like it is, and I don't even like saying it because I'm a 30-year real estate guy. But like my returns and what I'll do in Bitcoin / crypto it will far exceed what I've done in real estate. I know that with super high conviction.
Yeah.
At the same time, so I wanted to free up lots more money to invest in this. But it's emotional too. I don't really like to sell property. But the interesting thing is what I do is I refinance property to invest in this. So why don't I just sell? Well, because I can refinance to 75%, get my money to work for me. If I sold, yes, I would have got 100% of my money out, but 25% would go to tax anyway. So I get to have my cake and eat it too. I get to do both.
Yeah.
So, and then I have sold some to buy, but I got partners that are, because I started in 95, I got partners that are at 65, 75, and even 84 years old. So I've done a bit of both. That's how I kind of combine the two. The interesting thing is, through all my study, I've learned so much more that I wish I would have known before. Like now I understand interest rates, where they are, where they're going. And it's not because of my real estate background. It's because of my Bitcoin / crypto study, where I learned a bunch of stuff that I didn't study before, but it crosses over and helps me understand money better. And so it's been a real benefit that way. And like I said, like Bitcoin is basically, it's like digital property. It's a hard asset like real estate. So there's so much crossover in principles. So the big principles, I could grasp them really fast. The how-tos, I struggled at the beginning with that big time. But the more important, bigger picture I got right away, because there's so much crossover. Like I always tell people, Bitcoin, it's not a currency. It's an asset. It's digital property. It has the fastest level of adoption of any technology in history.
Yep. And when you think about real estate, you think about investing. If you take it to its core level, it's simple supply and demand. And the thing with Bitcoin is it's a limited amount. You're not building more Bitcoin, It's finite. Supply is limited. You're not getting more Bitcoin. So what happens to the constant rise in demand and adoption?
There's other principles that apply, like use an example, like say for me on real estate. When I started buying in Edmonton, that's back in 95, all the newspapers was nothing but negative. Average vacancy was actually over 10%. There was no hoopla at all. But I had conviction because I did the study, did the work, and I was part of a good group. The same thing happened recently here in Alberta. Like, as you know, as a realtor, now everybody's got their eyes open on Alberta, where I was doing more of my purchasing a couple of years ago because I could see it coming because I understood. So a line, I remember I wrote it down here. Someone said to me before, a mentor of mine, he goes, the richest investors arrive at the same conclusion before anyone else. And so that's where I'm at, was at with real estate, but that's where I'm at on the crypto Bitcoin side too. Like now it's like hopefully some other people will jump on the wagon too, just for their sake. I'm not like I'm joint venturing. Arrive at the same conclusion before everybody else. Remember, Elray, I was talking to you about a townhouse I bought, like this was about a year ago. That's before we were now getting the press in the Alberta, but that was before that.
Yeah.
And I bought that townhouse. Actually, I bought it. It was the numbers worked out to slightly negative, but I paid fair value. I paid $235, and the most recent comp now is $310. But it wasn't all in the papers, and
Yes.
Alberta's on fire and all that stuff.
Yes.
It's still a good time to get in. Don't get me wrong, but the best are in even earlier, and which is always feels scarier, feels riskier. But with the work and the study and you put in the time to understand markets and different stuff, whether it be Bitcoin or whether it be real estate, you put in that time and you're not nervous and you're not scared. You have conviction. But if you don't put in that time, you don't have conviction. Yeah. It's like me with interest rates. I just replied to someone sent to me just like literally 2 days ago about when they should do the renewal. They're gonna do a 5-year. They're gonna lock in 5 years right now, and I'm like, no. And they're like, yeah, because they're worried about that. This way they feel secure and they know their payment won't go up. Well, for me, I'm like, hell no, because I understand what's going on in the market and why. Not guaranteed, just super high probability that we're going to have 3 to 5 more rate decreases this year.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. But it's again putting in the time and the work to understand those concepts.
And for our listeners out there, if you're still listening, you're clearly not dabbling. You're thinking long game. And maybe some of you have arrived to that conclusion. I wish I could myself and Arlen could keep this conversation going. When we get going, we can really chat for hours. But for you guys listening out there, this isn't enough. It's not enough to get started. It's not enough to decrease the risk, right? You decrease the risk by getting experience and getting more knowledge on it all. So if you're interested in Arlen's approach to layering crypto into real estate and digging a little bit deeper, maybe understanding a little bit more so you can play at that next level, I managed to convince Arlen to host a private Zoom call where he's going to go even deeper into the strategy, and it's live. So we'd be able to get some questions answered as well. We can share some more sharp insights, straight answers to questions. As you probably can tell by my conversation with Arlen, he's a straight shooter. He doesn't hold things back. He says it like it is. People pay to get into a room with this guy and hear what he has to say. But I got him to do this for completely free. So depending on when you're hearing this, it might already be like full or too late. So check the link in the show notes to see if there's still spots open. And if there is, grab one. If you're meant to be in the room, you'll know. And if you didn't miss this, don't worry about it. You can still tap into Arlen's no BS wisdom by following him on Facebook. Make sure to set him as your favorite though. He drops gems every single day on the regular. No fluff, no guru talk, just honestly sharp thinking and strategy from someone who's actually doing the work. So Arlen, I really want to give a massive thanks for coming on, sharing so openly, calling it like it is. I know the audience got more than they bargained for you. I want to say to everyone else listening, if this episode really hit home, send it to someone that you care about. And the one still playing small during a boom, they'll thank you later. They really will. I'll catch you guys on the next one.
And just remember, if I could do it, you guys, anyone could do it, right? Seriously, I mean, I'm just a redneck freaking Albertan. I'm nothing special. I could do it. You could do it.
To our listeners out there, if you're looking for more valuable insights, be sure to subscribe. Share this with someone who can benefit. And as always, keep investing smartly.